Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges, as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
Welcome, everyone, to the next chapter with Charlie. My special guest today is Jennifer Manocherian, a vibrant and impressively accomplished debut novelist who at the age of 85 challenges conventional narratives about aging and creativity with writing her very first novel titled Alphabet. And we will talk more about that on the show. Jennifer is gifted with a spirit of relentless curiosity and boundless energy. Her background, encompassing screenwriting and theater production, adds layers to her understanding of character development and narrative crafting. Jennifer's story is not just about writing a book. It's about, catch this, it's about embracing life's challenges and pursuing one's passions at any stage of life. Love it. Let's bring Jennifer Manocherian on the show. Jennifer, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thank you. And by the way, I shouldn't admit it, but I'm a year older than than you have me. I'm actually 86 at this point.
Okay. But you wrote the book at 85.
Well, I won't say I wrote it in a book. It came out in 85. I mean, it's hard to write a book in a year. Maybe experienced people can, but I published it when I was 85.
And you're writing another one now, is that correct?
I am. Instead of writing it, I'm talking to you.
So is this your writing time?
Well, no. Well, I always is my writing time, but then I get all these interruptions. So I'm basically I need to put aside everything else in a few days, which I'm trying to do next week, and just really, really get to the end of draft number 2, and then go back to a third draft, which I really need to be putting a lot of things into.
Oh, you're that close. You're draft number 2.
Well, yeah, I know. I mean, I have my whole story. I know where it's going. I have it all in my head and a lot of it on paper. But there's a lot of things, like it's going to take place in the year 2024. And I have to put in a lot of things related to the year, to, relevant things to this particular time of year. I have to track what the time. There's a lot of just kind of boring things I have to layer into it and know where I am in terms of that. And just personality things along the way I've realized that I have to do, but I've kind of put a list of what I have to put into it when I get to draft number 3, so I don't stop and do it at that time.
When you were doing, I'm curious, when you're doing character development in your novels, or even in your screenwriting, how much of the character do you understand, do you feel comfortable with before you start writing about the character? Well,
I have to tell you, this woman lives within me. I think about her a lot. And before I begin, I mean, that's such a good question. With this particular woman, because she's a character in my first novel. And so I had a good handle on her before. But my first novel, it was a new thing, but every character I had to get, I think authenticity comes from knowing your characters. So I feel very strongly that you really have to know your characters. This may seem like a non sequitur, but yesterday I live in New York and I saw the play Gypsy with Audra McDonald, the actress playing the lead role. And honestly, the way in which she had internalized Mama Rose, I mean, there wasn't one second on that stage where you ever felt she was Audra McDonald. She was Mama Rose. And I was thinking about how that's how I want to feel, that I know my characters when I'm writing them, where what they say, how they do, what they put on, everything about them is something that you really, really deeply know. because I think that's, to me, what makes a good story is, I mean, listen, plot is always a bit interesting. You could think something has to happen. It's not like it can just be, but this is, I mean, my style, I have to say, a lot of it's character driven. You're not going to have car chases or all sorts of exciting things going on. It's really more about her internal journey and the people she meets along the way and what has to happen. So I know this woman.
You know what I'm wondering? I dabbled a decade or two ago. I dabbled with short story. I mean, very short story, but just dabbling. I'm not really a fiction writer. But one thing I discovered is that as I wrote more about the character, I found the character came to surprise me. The character would do things that I wasn't expecting the character to do.
Oh, absolutely. That's why you can't know it all beforehand. I mean, or I can't.
Right.
Some of the things that have happened, even if my initial idea of how I was going to do it has not, it's changed along the route, because it's changed based on my understanding of her and how she would behave in a certain situation. And it kind of happens as I'm writing it. I mean, it may sound really weird, and maybe, I don't know, does it sound unprofessional? I don't know. But it's the only way I can do it, where it's a discovery as I go.
Yeah, they're evolving. The character is evolving almost subconsciously, isn't it? It's not like a conscious effort. It's just, it happens and you go, oh, wow, where did that come from? And
this is what I thought she was going to do, but that doesn't seem authentic to me. That doesn't seem like how she would respond.
How fun. I can't wait.
So
I can't wait. I've not read your book.
That's kind of how I do it.
Not read your book, but I'm looking very much, I'm looking forward, after we were chatting, I'm looking forward to reading your book. Your first novel.
Listen, Charlie, I have to tell you, your image is a little bit blurry. I don't know if it's my computer or yours. We're having a little issue
get you.
there.
You're blurring in and out, but I'm looking at me, and I'm on my computer, and I'm fine. So we're just going to go with it.
Okay.
We'll see what happens.
Okay.
I got a producer that will come in and check. But thank you for letting me know. With that, let's move on to my next question. So Jennifer, your resume is exhausting. I tell people,
scatterbrain. My father called me a scatterbrain. That's what my resume is.
But look what you've done with the scatterbrain. I mean, I put here's what I was thinking. In addition to being a mother of 5 with 15 grandchildren, now be done. For most people, that's a job. That's it. But you are a screenwriter, theater producer, family therapist, and now at 85, or I should say 86, you were the writer. You wrote your first fiction, and now you're writing your second fiction. So, I'm tempted to ask a question. I'll tell you the question I'm tempted to ask, but I'm not asking. The question I'm tempted to ask is, where in the world have you found the time and energy to be so impressively accomplished over such a long lifespan? But instead, there's lots of answers to that. Instead, I'm interested in a different question. Okay. What drives you to be so industrious?
That's a hard question. I think I've always been driven. I married very young. By the time I was 27, I had 4 children.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had my kid. Well, then I had a 5th child when I was in my 30s after 7 years. But I had, and I had a busy life. I was involved in a community. I had my kids were, I also had a nephew living with us for part of that time. So I had 5 even before I had 5. And my life's just always been busy. And it's like, I think in those days, that was before really the women's movement, because that was really when I was around 30 when the whole role of women changed. And but just being a regular mom in those days, you got kids of different ages, you got homework for them to deal with, teachers conferences, maybe an after school class, you've got maybe kids in different schools at different you've got to drive them here and there, you've got to cook for everybody, I gave dinner parties and those, I've always had a full life. Oh, from the very time I was young. And I just got used to, and I have the DNA in back of it, where I have, my mother had enormous, enormous energy. She died at 94. And at 94, my mother was really a phenomenon, I have to say. She had a memory like you wouldn't believe. She had they had over 5,000 books in the apartment. And my mother could tell you where any book was. You go into this room and it's on the third bookshelf and it's the fifth book in.
Oh my.
And she, even at the end of her life, my mother would, as she became more limited in what she could do because of just old age, she was resourceful. She'd then do something else. My father didn't have that. When he couldn't do something, he just was hard for him. But I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of a detour.
Well,
but I just think I was blessed with a kind of a DNA that has that type of energy, and I have good health, which is really important. And I just have a drive. I don't know whether it's like now I'm getting very psychological, but maybe I'll say I was the black sheep in a way in my family. I was the middle of three sisters, and I was like a classic underachiever, and they were both achievers. And for my father, everything was about academic achievement. And so, of course, I was I didn't fail, but I didn't get serious about myself until I was in my teens. And I guess, did I have to prove myself? I think my sisters think I spent my life trying to prove myself. I don't think that that's really fair. I think my mother, my mother kept diaries all her life, which I didn't find until after she died. And when I read some of them, it was like I was reading about myself, and I had never had that kind of an identification with my mother while she was alive. But she was so driven, and she had to do every day, she had to practice piano for this many minutes, and she had to knit for this many rows. She had these assignments she had to do that she put upon herself all the time. And it was never enough. She could never be satisfied until she'd done enough. So I think a lot of it came from my mother as well. But it doesn't, you can say it's like a need to prove myself, but I really don't feel like I feel like it's because I really love what I do. I feel excited by challenge. I enjoy it. So if that's what started me in the first place, I think it's taken on a life of its own.
So when you were a mom of young children, when you're in your 20s and 30s, are you writing at that time, or is that something that started later?
Well, when I was in my late 20s, I started, I wrote a few articles for a local magazine because I wanted to. I had a drive, and I was doing PTA, all these things, but I found it so frustrating. At that time, my third and fourth kid were in nursery school, and they were with Irish twins, right? 13 months apart. And they'd be ready to be picked up by the time I've sat down in front of my typewriter in those days and started to do things. I found it really frustrating. I just couldn't do it. So I stopped doing that. I figured this isn't the time in my life to be doing that.
When did you start writing as a professional?
Well, I honestly, I cannot tell you that I have owned the word writer until really fairly recently.
Really, even though, and you've got so many screenplays and so
Well,
many
I don't have
productions.
so many screenplays. At this point, I have 2 movies that I've written and co-produced, and one of them right now is hopefully it'll be distributed sometime in the next year, and it'll have its own life. And I've written other ones, but I don't know. It's very hard to me to ever feel legitimized. I guess I have the syndrome so many people do. Shoot, I can't think of the word for it, but where you never feel totally authentic. And
Oh, really?
there's a oh my gosh, this is going to drive me
I
nuts.
don't know. Not feeling
Yeah, there's a
authentic.
syndrome many people experience where you feel like, yeah, I have to feel like I've earned something. And so I finally have at the point I will write on something that I'm a writer and it feels good. And it's taken me a very long time to be able to feel that, really land there, even though I've written different things. I've written a couple of musicals with composers we're a team. And in fact, we're working on another one right now. We're working on a musical series. It's a lot of fun. And so.
And you write the backstory. You don't write the music.
I write the book, so to speak. It's called the book, the story and the dialogue and all of that. And then I work with the composers to figure out what can be done in song and how should it be done and so forth. And we've been working together for almost 10 years, and we have a great time. I love doing it, and the new one we're doing is, we'll see what happens. We're hoping to get it streamed, but we'll see. But it's only recently that I can, and even as a producer, how many things I produced. I mean, I have a producer title, but producing these days there's so many ways of defining what a theater producer is and does. Very often it's just somebody who raises the money.
Right.
But the people creatively who really direct something, I've had some experience with that, particularly off Broadway. But I don't like owning something that doesn't feel real to me.
That's beautiful. How about, you're a family therapist. When did that?
Not anymore.
But you were a family therapist, right?
Right.
So when did that happen in your life? Did that come
happened
before
in
writing?
my late 30s and 40s. In my 40s, I finally, the year I dropped out of college when I was very young. Not to get married at that time, but because I was dying to start working. I mean, I had this need to be working, but I didn't realize that you actually needed to have some qualifications. So I was about to go back to college. I realized very quickly it wasn't very smart, but I got a very bad case of mono. I mean, I was really laid low for months. And then I got married. So over the years when my kids were young, in my 20s, I was taking courses here and there. And then finally, by the time there came a point where I decided maybe there's a program in New York. It's called Empire State College. Well, Empire State University now.
Uh-huh.
It's an alternative college where you can find, basically when I did it, you work with a mentor and you create your own curriculum, and you can take college courses and at other colleges, and that can be incorporated into your curriculum. There's different ways you can get your degree, but it was unrealistic for me at that time in my life for me to be going to college, as a regular full-time student. It didn't work. But slowly over the years, I was accumulating college credits. I was taking different courses at different. We're near SUNY. Purchase. We're near Manhattanville, different schools. There was an NYU division that was near me at that time. So I just kept acquiring credits. And then finally I put it all together, went to Empire State College, figured out how much I had to do to finally get a degree. And finally I got my degree my undergraduate degree, the same year I had my 5th child. I was 34. And then I started working part-time, 2 days a week, which I felt I could do and still I wanted to be everything to everybody. I'm still trying to do that.
That's
But
interesting. Do I have a similar story that I went to college and I had a I went to UCLA and I had a full scholarship for gymnastics. And that was in 1967. And by 1970, I had quit and quit my job, my role as a gymnast, and became a full-time hippie. I was at UCLA and became a full-time hippie, bought a Harley Davidson motorcycle,
oh,
hitchhiked
you should have
around
gone
the
to
country.
Berkeley.
What's that?
I said you should have gone to Berkeley.
Oh, I used to hitchhike to Berkeley. Do you remember, any chance, do you remember the People's Park March? It was a big march back in those days, and it was to save a
I
park.
was probably home changing diapers.
Yeah, and I was hitchhiking to San Francisco to Berkeley to be part of that protest.
Oh
But
my God.
I too returned to college. I decided to go to seminary. I didn't have a college degree, so I was going to get certificates in seminary instead of a degree. And I had a professor that hooked me up with a college, not totally unlike the one you went to, but I was able to get credits, and I got a bachelor's degree 2 weeks after I got my master's degrees.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. Well, you see, my route and even my master's degree. Well, I started working, as I say, part-time it was in a business my husband had, because that meant I could control my hours and my days and stuff. And it was doing public relations, but it wasn't a great idea to be, working with my husband. And so then just almost like without a lot of my decisions have not been, I mean, I don't know if I'm scatterbrained, but a lot of my choices have not been made with it was like almost a reaction rather than a really fully thought out thing. But I decided I don't want to be doing this. I want to get a master's. So I went to get a master's degree, and I did it in an alternative program. I had a great time, I have to tell you. It was one full day a week, and it was very experiential. And it was with the same group of people all the time. And it was a wonderful interlude from motherhood. And I loved it. And then when I got my degree, I decided to then get a certificate. And I don't know if I got a certificate. I guess I did training in family therapy. And then ultimately I became a divorce mediator as well. And I was kind of grandfathered in to the Family Therapy Institute where I was working. I wound up on their faculty, and then I was also leading a divorce mediation training program. So that was in my 40s. But I can have to every step of the way, when I talk about feeling kind of inauthentic and how long it's taken me to claim being a writer, it's like all of the things I've done have been a little bit off kilter, or I don't know, that's not the right word. But an alternative college degree. Okay, it's not Radcliffe where my sister went. It's not. It's something I could dismiss in my own mind if it wasn't me. It was the only way I could get these things done. My master's the same way. Even as a family therapist, I was in a training program. I was on a faculty training people who I couldn't even be. With the degree I had, which was only a master's in counseling, I couldn't even be training the people. My degree was lower than anybody I was working with. So and then when I jumped out of that and went into theater, again, it was something where I hadn't paid all my dues. So it's something that's kind of, I just.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, your success.
I think I'm thinking about, I don't know if I don't consider myself a great success. What I do is I just do a lot of things, and I'm a do-it-yourselfer, and it's kind of the theme of my life. I mean, since I was a kid, my parents, in my mother's diary that I found, I saw soon after we had moved to Connecticut, there was an entry in my mother's diary that said they couldn't find me one day. I was almost 4, and I was walking by myself to the town, and it was about a mile away. It's like I've always had this need to kind of go out and do things on my own. I taught myself to ride a bicycle. It was my sister was 6 years older than me. She had a huge 2-wheeler, and I taught myself to ride her bicycle. I couldn't even sit on it. It's kind of the story of my life, is that I'm and the result of it, I'm thinking of, I mean, God, this is making me think of so many things. So I don't know if I'm boring everybody, and I apologize.
No. This is fascinating.
But I remember my godmother, who didn't have children, and she, when we had a summer place near where she was, and she had a sewing machine, and I decided I wanted to learn to make a dress. And she was an expert sewer. I didn't want to learn anything from her. I went into a room in her house with that sewing machine, and I came out of it about 8 hours later with a dress. Now, with the zipper and everything in it. Now, it was very crudely made, and it's just. But it's like I'm not good at. I teach myself things, even with the screenwriting, even with my screenwriting, with the first movie that I did. I worked on it with my son, and then we got a director for it. It's called Family Blues. It's still on Amazon and a couple of places. And this was in the 90s. And we got a director who had done a lot of television, and she was experienced, Nell Cox. And Nell sat us down in an apartment in the city for like 2 weeks, during the day for 2 weeks. And by the end of that 2 weeks, my son was out the door. He had just had it. I mean, it was just, learning, really going through the process of it. That was my course in learning how to write a screenplay. We wrote one, and then I had to learn how to write one, if that makes any sense to you.
No, it makes perfect sense. Our stories, it's fascinating. Our stories are not all that dissimilar. With my degrees, I had a major in humanities. And then my last job was that I did with this particular group of people over a decade. And I was the executive coach to CEOs of billion-dollar companies. Mm-hmm. And I have zero credentials. I just have experience that people know. I can think with them. I call myself a partner in thought. We could go through ideas, and it's just, we have the PhD and EDDs. I've got three-letter acronyms behind my name, and I call them GSD, FSO, and MSU. So the first one, GSD, is obviously I get shit done. The second one, FSO, I figure shit out. That's it. I don't need a course on it. I figure it out. And then the last one is my favorite, MSU. I make shit up. I need
that. I got to put that in back of my name. I need that to credential. That's my credential. And my first case in divorce mediation was a very hard case. And the husband kept saying to me, "Tell me what your experience is. How many cases have you done?" This was my first case. I could have told him about my degree that I have in MSU.
in MSU and making shit up. That's what I do.
I went to this university called MSU.
You know what I want to do? I'm looking at our time. We're about 30 minutes in. I think I want to take a break, and then I want to come back and I want to change subjects, and I want to start talking about creativity, because I'm sure that's a major part of your life. So Let's take a brief break, and we'll come right back. Hi there. You're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and this is Charlie Hedges and my very special guest, Jennifer Manocherian. And she is author, writer, screenplay producer. She's just, I can't wait to talk to her about, and we've talked about her life getting where she's at. But you know what I want to talk to now about, Jennifer? I want to talk a bit about creativity. Because
Okay.
I think you have ideas on creativity, that you have ideas on everything that are unique. Because you make stuff up, it's original, and it's not pre-scripted. So I want to tell you about a podcast that I heard, and we had talked about this before. I listened to a podcast one time where the guest claimed everyone is a creative. And, to some degree we are, there is creativity in people, but I wouldn't say, I'm not comfortable in saying everyone is a creative. I think there's more to it than that. What do you think?
Well, I think, you talked about your short story writing, right?
Right.
I think maybe everybody can write a short story, but there's skill involved, there's craft involved, and then there's that je ne sais quoi. There's do you want to call it creativity? There's something that distinguishes it from one thing that's really good from another. It's I think that I don't know why this popped into my mind as an answer to what you're saying, but I live near New York City, and the Metropolitan Museum once had an exhibit on Vermeer, and his very famous study, I think, of the girl with the pearl earring and stuff. There was a whole school of artists who did those types of paintings. And honestly, if you looked in that room of some of the things that were like it, and then the real thing, you could tell the difference. There's a difference between true creativity and just true craft. It's like the people who work really, really hard at school and wind up doing really well, and then the people for whom things come easy. That's a terrible answer. That's really not a good. But you have to have an imagination. Maybe this is really not true. But I'm wondering if you have to have a sense of humor. You have to have a perspective. You have to be able to look at people and kind of, whatever form of art it is, whether it's journalism or whether it's painting or whatever media you work in. I don't think everybody can be a true artist. I don't.
Right. No. I dabbled. You know what I did, Jennifer? I painted for about a decade. And like everything else, I didn't take any classes. I taught myself to paint. And I can't draw stick figures, so I'm an abstract painter. And I did, I'm sure I did 100 paintings. And I produced some pieces that were interesting, but none that I would call are really good. I'm not an artist. I'm not a painter. I believe I can write, but but the painting, I did it for a decade. I totally enjoyed it. The process was magnificent. The process of this stuff coming out of inside of me and going onto a canvas.
Yeah, I get that.
It was just magnificent. But I realized after this decade that I wasn't getting any better. I was just producing the same stuff over and over again. And the only way I could get better was to go to school. And I didn't want to do that. I'm not good at school.
To learn more skill or more craft.
Right. And even then, because I knew my talent level, I could have been okay, but I really don't feel like I could ever call myself an artist.
I think that to think of creativity is only applying to the arts is obviously a limited way of looking at it. People can be creative thinkers in any field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Business.
I mean, look at Elon Musk.
Yes.
Or don't if you don't choose to. But but I think that I don't think all people have a need to be creative in their lives. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a very limiting thing to think of creativity. I mean, somebody who could just kind of live a rather ordinary life, but makes the best brownies that anybody's ever tasted. I mean, that's creative. I mean, I think anybody can find within themselves something that they probably really enjoy and are pretty good at. Maybe that's creativity. I guess I'm thinking of it more in terms of what gets some kind of has some kind of outside approval attached to it.
Some kind of appeal. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, I read, are you familiar with Rick Rubin, the music producer, Rick Rubin?
No.
He's big. He's produced everybody. Rick is kind of the guy in the field that everybody wants Rick. He wrote this magnificent book called The Creative Act. And he talks about creating as a way of life, a way of being. And I'm wondering, is creativity, what would you think, is creativity more of an art, or is it actually a way of life that produces art?
Well, to me, it's a need. And I mean, whether it's, I knit a lot, and I loved creating designs. That's kind of what I enjoy doing. So I knit a lot of, actually at this time in my life, I've did so many things for my grandchildren. I've stopped. But I knit toy animals that I give away for charity. And that to me has a certain creative element to it. I enjoy doing it. I'm not great at it. Like everything else, you can certainly find flaws with it. But I enjoy doing it. I feel a creativity when I do it. I like cooking. There's a lot of things I like doing. And as far as writing goes, to me, writing is I think I talked to you about it. It's how I think and it's how I organize my thoughts. And to me, writing is obviously we don't have a lot of perspective on our own writing. It's very hard to do that. I'm used to my style. I sometimes wonder if particularly in my teaching, if I'm like too controlling about how things should be worded. But
oh, really?
I don't know. I mean, I always, make it clear it's anybody's project, and I'm one person's opinion. But I do have. I'm maybe I'm a better editor than I am a writer. I don't know. I hope. I'm pretty good at editing. But I enjoy anything. I like reading. I like anything involving that.
Well, maybe as I'm listening to you, and I'm really tracking with you, that when that podcast guest said everyone is a creative, maybe we're talking creative with a small c or creative with an uppercase C, and if
I think that's
creative
a great
with
way
an
of
uppercase C
it.
is a gift.
Yes, and C is just, and with a small c, we all do it in our own little ways.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You can be a creative mom. You can come up with creative things to do with kids. There's a lot of creativity. How do you read a book to a child? Good night, moon. Hello, or do you do things with flair? Do you do it acted out? I mean, it's a creative act to read to a kid.
Oh, I used to read to my son. I remember a children's book that we loved, The Fish a Wish, and
don't know that one.
What's that?
I don't know that one.
Oh, it was good. The fish that could wish, and the fish for some reason wished he couldn't wish, and he couldn't wish anymore, and he missed it.
Oh, that's
it was
cute.
good. But I would read Harry Potter to him, and we would both just get so into it, just snuggle in bed, and he would be
That's the
just
best.
enamored.
You see, that's creative way of, it has so many benefits to it. You encourage kids to read and you help them see the joy of literature. And it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to go over, there was two of my granddaughters would come over together and we read this really silly, stupid book and we came up with our own way of doing it. And honestly, long past the ages when they would have been ever even looking at that book, they would still want to do that with me just for fun.
I want to talk to you. We were talking about creativity and then you had mentioned something. I'd wanted to talk to you about writing, but I loved what you said about writing, and that is it's a way of organizing your thinking. I'm in a writing project right now, and I'm enjoying it. I'm 3 chapters in, but it is a daunting task. What does writing, in your process of writing, do you ever find that writing, you're into the process, you're into the story, you're into the script, but it becomes daunting? It's not a flow, it becomes a work?
Yeah. Well, let me answer that. When it becomes work and you're forcing it, I don't know that the output is going to be what you're going to be happy with. I feel like sometimes our muses just take a break. Sometimes we need to, I just kind of, I think it's very hard to force something when you're not feeling it. I've had that. I don't know if that's applying to what you're saying, but I've had times where I'm just not sure how to go about it. And so I give myself a little breather. I'm also, I've been in the entertainment business for a long time now, and a lot of projects, it's like you have a lot of balls up in the air and you have to wait for things to come through. So when you're not doing one, you may be working on another, it's just, sometimes I'll just have to put something aside, work on something else for a while and wait until I'm feeling like inspired again. That's me. I can't, there may be some people who can, kind of push and write that way. And through doing that, they'll get through to what it is they're needing to feel about their writing. But I find that I know that when I'm writing and it doesn't feel like I'm just kind of hammering it out, it's not going to work for me. It's going to show.
I did that. I was writing it. As I told you, I just returned today from a trip to a monastery where I was writing, and I finished the 3rd chapter of a book I'm writing, and I just said that was my conclusion, Jennifer, is that it has become, I'm so passionate about this writing. I really feel this piece is so strong that it's something that needs to be heard, and that's not stated a lot. And so my passion about it is almost overwhelming. And I feel, you had talked about inadequate. I feel a sense of inadequacy. I feel like I am failing to do what I want to do. And
well, you're making me curious about what needs to be said that isn't being said, but there's a lot. So let's not. Well, but maybe what it is that you have so many ideas that you're having trouble channeling it into whatever your characters are, whatever's happening. That's so that it's not, it's not overwhelming. It's just, you just need to kind of narrow your focus.
So that is not, it's not uncommon to have those moments and then take a break and come back refreshed. And
No, I don't. Listen, nothing in life goes always smoothly, right? Does anything? I'm waiting for it. Come and get me. I'm happy. I'd be very happy to have life just always be on the same level, as long as the level is a good one. But it doesn't happen that way. Not in my life. I mean, I have to be honest. If something is happening with one of my kids or my grandchildren, and it's disturbing me, it's going to be. I don't know. I'm going to be sitting at my computer and thinking, "What the hell am I doing?" It's like I'm going to be actually what I'll probably be doing on when I'm feeling that way is writing, but not writing what think I'm supposed to be writing, but trying to figure out how to get through my thoughts in terms of what's going on, in terms of what I may or may not be able to do to be helpful. So I won't be writing the so-called thing I'm supposed to be writing, but I just wait. I mean, there was a time in my life, and this wasn't writing, this was something else, but it was a very tough time in my life involving one of my children. And sometimes I would, I couldn't focus, but I didn't want to just be home and overly available. It's just too hard to explain, but I would sometimes just go into a parking lot and sit in my car and think. So I think it'll come back to you, particularly when you care so much about what you have to say.
Yeah, very
just has to
passionate.
figure. It's almost like you write a list of all the points you want to make and how you're going to get them made, and not put it. It's not going to be all happen in one place. I mean, this what I'm writing. It's evolving, and to me, it's a matter of time to get it finished rather than not being able to get it done. But I also don't think any time that I'm not sitting and writing on this character is wasted time, because I think about her a lot. I think, well, what's the next, what is she going to be doing now? How is she going to be handling this? What am I going to title it? That's a big one for me. What's my title going to be? I'm thinking of something. No, it can't be. Something that makes you curious.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me. Is titling is a big thing.
This can't be happening. How does that sound like a title?
I love it.
This can't be happening. I'm going to write it down.
That's a great title. That's a great title. This can't be happening.
I kind of like that.
So what I want to do is I want to start wrapping up our show, and I've got this question that I have written down, and I'm thinking, I don't know if it's a good question or not, but I'm gonna dabble with it. So in speaking with you, Jennifer,
just don't ask me my weight.
No, I don't. I would normally not ask your age, but you've told me. After speaking with you earlier this week and talking with you more in detail today, it is obvious that you're a role model for women in America, in that you've done so many different things, and you are pleased with your life, you felt good. But you know what you have that I like is that you have, the thought came to me is a very common wisdom. And common wisdom is uncommon, in that you have not done, you've not organized your life in the way a 25-year-old would organize her life today. You had a totally different approach, and you took life as it comes. You let your passion drive you. Well,
I don't. You said something that I just have to qualify. I'm not a role model for women in America. I think that to the extent that I am a role model, I feel like for people when you get older, there's still time to do more in your life. I guess that would be what I would like people to think. If you have the energy and the health and something you really want to do it. That's kind of what I think. What's the worst that's going to happen? You know, that you're going to regret that you didn't do it, or you'll do it and it won't work. Well, so what? Just go out and do it. That's what I think. But my life is, it's not chronological. I mean, it is chronological, but it's not related to age. I just feel like it's related to where I am in my life with my family, because my family is my, the base of everything. So when my kids were young, when the women's movement came around, I couldn't quite see my way through it. But I knew I had that, I started churning, let's put it that way. I knew I wanted to be doing something outside the home. And in my 30s, I was exploring it. And what can I do without feeling like I'm not there for my family in a way that's important to me to be there? It's like, it's not every decade. I can't look at it that in terms of decades as much as in terms of what I'm doing. And at each period of my life, there have been different people in my life. When I was younger, it was other mothers more. And then when I was in the field of therapy, it was the other people on the faculty and people I knew there. And life is it's constantly changing, depending upon who are the people in my life at that time. Now, some people have lives that are more planned. I mean, if they have a career. I mean, I'm very lucky, and my husband's been very successful, and I don't have to make a living, because if we did, we would not be doing very well.
Yeah. My wife still works, and I say, not only am I a kept man, I'm a very well kept man.
There you go. Well, we would be eating like I don't know, canned soup or something, or dog food if it was up to me, because I never made a lot of money. Well, maybe as a therapist, I had a little bit of an income, but never a lot. And so, but there are people who, you go into a track in your life. Let's say you're a publisher or an editor, and you spend your life doing that. And your life, these are just different lives. I don't know that one is better than another. It's just because of the nature of who I am in my life, and the fact that I have gone to different things in my life. I haven't had like a sustained group of people, the same people with me all my life. I haven't done the same thing all my life.
I can't even imagine doing that. That sounds so.
But that's your personality. I'm kind of an outsider. That's how I see myself. I'm kind of an outsider. I've always had a lot of group people in my life and a lot of friends, but I'm never like committed to one group. I've always hopped around. It's very consistent in my life that's how I have been. Even when I was younger, even growing up, and there were always these little cliques, and I would be like on the periphery. I had kind of a main group, but I was part of other groups. I like different types of people for different types of reasons. Gosh, am I off subject?
No, you're not. You're not. And as a matter of fact, you're leading into my final question. And my final question is one, I don't know if this is something you think about or this is going to be an off the wall question, but I'm wondering, in wrapping this up, do you have any core principles that direct your way of thinking or your way of life? Are there core principles that sort of drive you? Sort of my GSD, FSO, MSU, those are my core principles.
Well, you've done something my husband's always wanted to do, silence me.
Oh, good. That's a good question then.
Well, family first is a big one for me. My my family grounds me. I'm so lucky. Our kids all live near us. We see them a lot. I'm in touch with everybody. A couple of my grandchildren live out of state, and I'm sorry about that. But even my I really, I grew up in a family, a very nuclear family, shall we say. My father's family came from England, and I was born just before World War II and at the cusp of World War II. So I didn't meet my other grandparents until after, like 1950, well after the war. And I never knew cousins. I didn't have cousins, So to me, I love the fact that we have this big family, and the kids, our grandchildren all know each other. They're all friends. Some of them travel together. Many of them live in the same building together.
Oh, my goodness, really?
Yeah, I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of my family, and my husband's
As you should be.
And my husband's Iranian. That's really important to him and his family. I get along with just about everybody, and it is so that's, I don't know if that's a core value the way you're saying it, but it's something that I feel like makes me feel good. That's all. I mean, and I always, here's my MSU. Here's my equivalent to it. I always say to my daughter, if I die and I have a tombstone, well, not if I die, I should say if I have a tombstone, what it should say is she tried. That's kind of my model in life. She tried. I try on all fronts. I try on, with relationships. I try with work projects. I try.
But
and I fail.
And you
fail.
you say that so casually, and yet it is a way of life. Trying is a way of life.
I see a recipe. I make it if I have people coming for dinner. If it doesn't work, if it tastes lousy, too bad. Go home and make your own food. I have a lot of things I want to do all the time, and I just try to fit it all in. And if something comes up, as I say, family first. If something bubbles up in my family, that's where I'm going to be.
Well, Jennifer, I got to tell you, what a fun time I've had on the show. You're a surprising and fresh guest. It is. There are no canned answers. There's Jennifer Manocherian, and that's it. And it's beautiful. It's so wonderful chatting with you, so almost vulnerably.
Well, can I give you a canned answer? A canned thing? I hope some of your readers may want to read my book. Be curious to see how whatever you think of me comes out and expressed in my book, because I love people to read my book.
It will be in the show notes and the links on the show notes. I have a link to Amazon on it, and I have a link to your website that people can look you up that way. But I do encourage people to read your book.
Yeah, the next book is going to be, you can say it was formulated on your podcast. This can't be happening.
This can't be happening. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with me today, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and I also want to thank everybody for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.